Hello, Space Junkies, and welcome to What a Piece of Junk, episode number 145 of the Star Wars podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. I'm your host, Scott Butman, and joining me is my original podcast co-pilot, Mr. Derrick Morrish. Derrick, how's it going?
Happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful mothers out there, whether they are kids, fur babies, blood, adopted, whatever it may be. Appreciate all those out there as it is May 12th. So
That's right.
Shout out
And
to my
we're
mom and to my wife. So
Yes, and we are keeping with the Mother's Day theme because on this episode of the podcast, we're talking about Star Wars Tales of the Empire, which involves mothers when it comes to Nightsisters, especially Morgan Elsbeth and the Nightsister coven that she was a part of. But more on that later as we bring in our expert on Star Wars animation, our very own Dave Filcloni, the Mr. Miracle, the gooey chewy man of 1,000 nicknames, Nathan Miracle. Nathan, how's it going? Are you salivating at the idea of discussing all this deep-cut Star Wars animation stuff?
Absolutely. We've got Tales of the Jedi, and I am here for it. I greatly enjoyed these episodes, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because we're going to break down all 6 episodes today. We're going to kind of break it into halves because, well, that's how it was set up on Disney Plus, and talk about both the Morgan Elsbeth side of things and also the Bariss Offee side of things, which I'm really excited about.
And Tales of the Empire this time around, not Tales of the Jedi. Although there is going to be more Tales of the Jedi. But anyway, I expect there to be several more Tales of blank as well, because I think these
Tales of the Cantina. We've been saying that for a while now.
That would be nice.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get right into it. We'll start off with episodes 1 through 3, which is about Morgan Elsbeth and her journey, as it were, to the point where we find her again in Star Wars The Mandalorian. And then, of course, we see her in Star Wars Ahsoka. It felt kind of weird for me, as always, with prequel-type stories, although now that is a long-standing Star Wars tradition, and heck, these days, thanks to Star Wars, that's a long-standing tradition in almost all of sci-fi and fantasy, to do prequel stuff. But, of course, this whole time, I'm watching Morgan Elsbeth do stuff and fight, and I know that she can't actually die, because I've already seen her at a point in the future. But at one point in these episodes, which I'll talk about in a few seconds here, the fact that I knew that she couldn't die actually helped make the fight more interesting to me, which I'll talk about when we hit there. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. So this is for all of the episodes 1 through 3, each only about 15 minutes long, especially once you truncate the intro and the credits. I'm not really sure why we had to have credits for every episode, but oh well. I skipped them. I skipped the credits on each of these episodes. So, Derrick, what did you like best about these episodes?
Well, for the Morgan Elsbeth story, what I really liked was the connectivity that we got of how she meets Thrawn. So I really liked that we finally got to see a little bit of Colonel Wolf Yularen as well, as he was part of the ISB, and we got to see, her kind of being tested by Thrawn. So that was really a lot of fun there. I really liked, the character Morgan Elsbeth. I liked the Nightsister story overall. Obviously, at no point does Asajj at this, meet up with Morgan Elsbeth at any point.
Yeah.
But that would have been kind of funny if it did. But but like I said, that was what I really enjoyed. I thought this was a really good, solid 3 episodes. There's a couple of things that I'll nitpick on the next question, but I really enjoyed this one over the second half. Though, like I said, both were good, but this one I felt was really strong, connected a lot of dots, especially since with all that's going on with Ahsoka. Most not officially, but it has been pretty much rumored that we are going to get a season 2 of Ahsoka as well, and then with the connections that will all lead into Dave Filoni's movie, tying all the knots into at some point here down the line. So obviously, Morgan Elsbeth, at least at this point, that we know at the end of season 1 of Ahsoka. Spoiler alert for those that haven't seen it yet. We do know that Morgan Elsbeth does die. But at this point, even to what you were saying, I know she couldn't die, but to get to where we were at really helped connect the dots, in my opinion, because when we first meet her, right, all we get is this kind of like witch hermit type deal, magistrate in this rundown city. Obviously, we see her do pretty well against Ahsoka in hand-to-hand combat, and then
Definitely.
and then it was kind of just this one-off episode. But then, yet a couple years later, then she makes this grand return in Ahsoka series, which then really kind of starts, wondering like, okay, there's a lot more to this, because I don't think initially any of us were under the impression when we first met Morgan that she was a Nightsister either. That felt like that was kind of all out of, either later added or just, something that would just be noted as a character. But again, what Filoni was figuring on writing with her later. But anyways, like I said, I really like this background, just like I did more of the Dooku side of things when we did Tales of the Jedi versus what we got with the Ahsoka. Not that I didn't mind the Ahsoka stuff, but I just felt it really added more to the character.
Yeah. For me, I actually made notes on my iPhone when I was watching these because I'm like, there's 6 episodes. I'm going to have to keep some stuff straight in my head, So I kind of have a favorite thing about each of the 3 Morgan Elsbeth episodes. First of all, in The Path of Fear, I think my favorite part of that was watching General Grievous at the top of his game. I mean, dude was just laying waste. And that duel with the mother that Morgan Elsbeth had, with those awesome sickle weapons that she, force enchanted right in front of us so that she could fight off the lightsabers, that was super cool. I loved how the runes were, slowly giving out as they absorbed lightsaber attacks. At least that's how I interpreted it. It was like she had a little meter of how long will these metal blades be able to withstand
battery
lightsaber
power
blades. Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is my power up meter. This is how much mana I have left, So that was really cool. For The Path of Anger, I loved the fact that we get TIE Defenders mentioned again, and now we have this awesome, expanded lore here of Morgan Elsbeth is one of the people who came up with TIE Defenders as a concept, and the Empire just basically rips her off, except that Grand Admiral Thrawn makes sure to, before he became a Grand Admiral, he's just Admiral Thrawn at this point, make sure to go ahead and say, I'm going to give you credit and I'm going to work with you instead of just, strip mining your planet for resources and whatnot. And then in The Path of Hate, the thing that I enjoyed the most, it's probably a tie, it was that duel, it was the duel in Path of Anger, the duel on the roof. It seemed like it started almost with her versus Rook, like a Mortal Kombat level, right? Because they're on each side of the screen, they're on this long, narrow
missing a pit of spikes at the bottom, right?
That's right. You can knock somebody off the side and they'll take damage, right? And of course, it was cool to see Rook again. So this duel was really, really rife with the whole, I know that neither Rook nor Morgan Elsbeth can get killed here because I've already seen each of them die somewhere else. And so that was kind of cool because I'm like, okay, well then how are we going to end this duel? Because it can't be a duel to the death. And so it was cool that Captain Paleon showed up, and then Grand Admiral Thrawn showed up and was all like, hey, I'm really impressed by you fighting my assassin. And Morgan Elsbeth is kind of like, well, great, but you're just going to kill me yourself now, so what's the big deal? And then he's like, no, I'm not, because that'd be a waste. But then in the last one, The Path of Hate, my favorite part was when the New Republic ambassador, who used to live on that planet, came back and was all like, we want you to join the New Republic. And she's like, why did you even leave in the first place? And she was all, I didn't want to stay here and work for you for what you call fair wages. Woot! Workers' rights even in Star Wars this summer, baby. Screw you and your terrible wage policy, Morgan Elsbeth. This is how we know you work for the dark side. Good times. Anyway, so those are my 3 favorite things. I really loved that duel and the feeling of this can go almost anywhere because we know that it won't have the traditional ending of somebody gets a saber through the gut and dies. All right, Nathan, what did you like best about these Morgan Elsbeth episodes?
Yeah, so this was interesting for me because I'm much more familiar with Bariss Offee as a character. I like Bariss Offee more than Morgan Elsbeth, but I really feel like these 3 episodes were better put together than the Bariss Offee ones. So there's more that I liked in these episodes. First off, I loved seeing General Grievous and the droids taking out the Nightsisters. That's something that we knew had happened. We've seen that elsewhere in Star Wars, but not on the screen. So it was good to get to see that on the screen. It was also neat to see how they made sure everything fit into the continuity. Morgan Elsbeth has tattoos at the beginning, but they disappear as the magic fades, and that explains why she doesn't have them when we finally see her in The Mandalorian. Which you pointed out that it almost seems like she wasn't meant to be a Night Sister at first. I think she was because the name Morgan is just too related to Morgan Le Fay to be a coincidence. But she certainly didn't feel like a Night Sister at first, and this explains why she didn't feel that way. She didn't have those markings. And then we also get a lot of connective tissue with the appearance in The Mandalorian, with the explanation of why Ahsoka is there, because we have that call that goes out to Bo-Katan. That also explains why Bo-Katan knows where Ahsoka is at that point in time. It also explains why the forest has been burned down. That always seemed a little odd to me, that we've got this city out in the middle of this burned down forest. What happened there? Well, now we know. So that all led right into that episode, and it really felt like that final episode was like minutes before the episode in The Mandalorian. Maybe hours, but definitely right before we get to see her in live action.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, let's move on to question 2. What did you like least about this episode? I'll go first because I have a fairly short list of what I liked least. Because like Nathan, I felt like the Morgan Elsbeth episodes of Tales of the Empire were a little better put together than the Bariss Offee episodes. But for the first one, did Nali die, or was she just injured before she told her mother that our path is true? I couldn't figure out if she was actually dead or if she just sort of passed out from her injuries. I did like the idea very much that the mountain tribe of witches was kind of light side-ish, whereas the forest tribe of Nightsisters was very much dark side-ish. And that Morgan Elsbeth came there and essentially corrupted a couple of the light side girls and led them astray. But I wanted more about the resolution of the light side girl stories. We just kind of ended, and then she picks up the mother there picks up her daughter, and then we move on to the next stage of Morgan Elsbeth's life, which I get. It's the Morgan Elsbeth show at the moment, so that's fine, except that I needed some kind of confirmation. Is she alive or is she dead? Did she die to learn that lesson, that our path is true, mother, or not? You think she's dead, Nathan?
I think she is very dead, because This is Star Wars. She was corrupted, as you mentioned. Then she came back to the true path, and in Star Wars, redemption equals death.
Yeah, okay. For the Path of Anger, the part that I disliked the most was we see Morgan Elsbeth now there at the place when she comes back and Grand Admiral Thrawn sends Rook to assassinate her, or not really, but test her. She's got her droids. I want to know where she got those droids, because she and droids weren't really getting along when we saw the first part of it. Then we get to part 2, and she's all like, but now I have my own assassin droid type dealy bops. And I'm like, what? I want that story. Also, I want more TIE Defender information. I love TIE Defenders, as you guys know. I rant and rave about them all the time, especially when it comes to Grand Admiral Thrawn and how I still think that's going to be his version of the super weapon, because, that's how it goes when you're dark side in Star Wars. You go get the super weapon. Anyway, I wanted to see the townspeople, Wing and all those guys, working hard, making some TIE Defenders. This does, however, lend further credence to my belief that the stuff in the crates that Grand Admiral Thrawn had on Ahsoka are somehow related to, or just very basically, TIE Defender parts. right? And the whole reason they're bringing them back to the main galaxy is so that he can use them in his campaign against the New Republic. And then finally, the thing that I disliked most about The Path of Hate was we see Wing with the little communicator that he gets from the New Republic. Thank you, Derrick. TIE Defender. We see Wing with the little communicator that he gets, and we hear Bo-Katan's voice, and then I'm like, oh, this is going to be a great ending, even though it's Tales of the Empire. We'll have that one literal tiny beacon of hope, and then Morgan Elsbeth, crunch. And I was like, oh, God, I hate her so much, which probably means I shouldn't list this as what I disliked, but it is very much what I hate. However, hate leads to the dark side, so... Anyway, that's my rant. Derrick, what did you dislike about these episodes?
Like I said, they're kind of just little nitpick things. And this first question is kind of just a proposal to you guys because I couldn't tell or not. Do you guys feel that, because I felt like at least in the Tales of the Jedi, the animation was still similar to the Clone Wars and Rebels type animation. Mm-hmm. And then Bad Batch, obviously we complained enough about that, but this animation seemed different. Like slightly enough. Like if you look at like Grand Admiral Thrawn, he looks different, and just the texture and it's a different, slightly different enough where I felt like it was enough to stand out to me that the animation wasn't quite Clone Wars, even Bad Batch type animation.
To me, it was a little more toward realistic. Their faces weren't as angular as Clone Wars could be sometimes. Their faces weren't as almost watercolor or acrylic painted as Bad Batch could have been sometimes. It felt a little bit more like they were trying to look smoother textures, more blended colors, especially Bariss Offee because of her facial markings and all, that could easily have come across as like, oh, she's wearing face paint on a maquette or a mannequin, right? Which is sometimes what I got from Clone Wars, is that it looked like a mannequin that had been painted and then was moving. Which, in some ways, I think was kind of the stylistic choice for Clone Wars, because it was a little bit of a tip of the hat to the old marionette-type shows, like, now I can't think of...
Team America, woo!
Yes, Team America, but of course that was a riff on the show that I can't think of right now. Somebody is yelling at their podcast right now as to the name of the show. It'll come to me later. Carry on, Derrick. But I agree with you about the animation style. Nathan?
I'm looking at the thumbnails on Disney Plus right now, and particularly with Thrawn and with the Grand Inquisitor, their faces just are not as gaunt as they are in the other animations. Which
but we didn't get that in Tales of the Jedi, right? That looked more like the normal one animation we're used to, right? Or was Tales of the Jedi like this? I'm trying to remember. And
I felt Tales of the Jedi was more like Clone Wars. Thunderbirds, that's the name of the show with the little marionette animated stuff. Thunderbirds,
I had to Google
Thunderbirds
that
are
one
go. Yeah, I did have to Google that. I'm like, what is the show with the adventure puppets? Anyway, I sometimes got that feeling from Clone Wars animation, but not so with Tales of the Empire.
I would say Tales of the Jedi is almost somewhere in between, because I'm looking at the thumbnails for that now, and looking at Count Dooku, he does not have the down to here face that he's got in the Clone Wars.
The reverse Pike's Peak from Star Trek Strange New World.
So. Yeah. He's always the funny one when people point out...
He's Beaker.
How, the live-action Grand Inquisitor doesn't look like the animated one. It's like, yes, because obviously Count Dooku should look like this.
But anyways, all I'm going to say is that I didn't like this style of animation. It seemed, again, more, I guess, more standoutish than Tales of the Jedi that I can recall. But like I said, they might have been similar. So to Nathan's point, I just didn't realize. Because again, I feel like the animation just keeps getting shoddier and shoddier as they've been making more stuff. So again, Star Wars, Lucasfilm, Disney, clean up your act with your animation, because... Like, if you're going to go down this, which we all appreciate, because, again, really great stories, but, clean it up a bit. I don't need to look like some kid fresh out of college put this together, which is probably Nathan, what they did.
Yeah. Nathan, weren't you pointing out a few episodes of the show ago that they fired a bunch of Star Wars animation people overseas that have been working on the project since
I did.
basically like
I called it
I
out.
was going to say,
yeah.
that was not me.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was done. It was
Sorry, Derrick.
was
Yes,
ironic.
good catch.
It was just ironic too because it was literally on the celebration of the Clone Wars movie that hit 10 years, and it was the same studio they closed because that was the one done over like in the Philippines or something like that, and they closed it down or something like that. So, but yeah, it just feels like lately they're just like, we're gonna pump out content, but we're not gonna make it look good, and it's like, well, this is what pissed us off about like Book of Boba Fett. This is what pissed us off about She-Hulk. All the stuff that we've complained about. It's like, again, I understand it doesn't need to be movie level CGI. Same thing here. It doesn't need to be Pixar level animation. But give me something decent, right? You don't need to go backwards. Because again, you can look at like Clone Wars season 7 and like that was stellar, right? And so, anyways.
Yeah. Well, Marvel fans have been having a similar complaint for a while now about the quality of the special effects.
Even in the movies.
And then even in the movies. And the special effects artists themselves have been saying, this is just like an absolute treadmill. When you do AAA video games, you sometimes hear the developers talk about being in the churn when it comes to getting the project done. And like the last week or 2 weeks, you barely ever sleep,
Yeah.
And the Marvel FX guys have been saying for a while now, we feel like we're in the churn 24/7, like all year long. We just don't ever have time to hardly even breathe. So we can't do the same kind of quality work as we once did because
Lucasfilm does it all. ILMN does it all for Star Wars and Marvel. So, anyways, that was a small gripe just because it was noticeably, specifically with some of the main characters that we've had, like Thrawn. It was like, okay, it's not the end of the world, but he definitely was darker blue skin than when we had in Rebels. But again, it was great to see, Lars Mickelson doing his thing. But the one thing I didn't care about, and this is where I'm unsure where we're at in the timeline with this, because at the end when the New Republic takes over and then we have Mando, it's about 5 years. This doesn't feel like 5 years. This feels like 3 to 6 months after Return of the Jedi when this takes place. But I could be wrong because, Nathan, I did notice that too, right? They're burning down the forest. And was that you said Bo-Katan was the one? Because I didn't read the credits and see the cast. So, like, why was the distress call going to Bo-Katan? So it makes me even stupider for my whole complaint of this, like, whole time gap. Because here you have, which, again, like the whole point of Morgan Elsbeth and this whole town, which I love the story, right? And how she has such a tight grip on this townspeople. It's like an abusive relationship, right? And yet they take it and they can't get out of this rut. But yet somehow this one person does. They just get up and walk away, come back, become like an ambassador, come back. So literally come back like 4.5, 5 years later at this point, or whenever season 3 of Mandalorian happens. Or I'm sorry, season 2 of Mandalorian happens, and she only brings like 8 guards with her, and yet the Rebel Alliance or the New Republic at this point knows that it's a TIE Defender, literally a holdout for the Empire, and all they get is that. So, well, what else are they manufacturing there? They got to be manufacturing parts.
I don't think the Republic has ever seen a TIE Defender.
They would have known from Rebels. When the whole Lothal. That was the whole point of Thrawn. They would have known about it. They would have known about... Hera was with them the whole time. So...
They at least had access to the computer records.
Yeah, and they would know who... And literally the ambassador would know who Morgan Elsbeth is. Like, she should know, like, how bad it is. And yet she went there with a few people. She knows she's not going to win. So she goes down there, and it's like... It's just stupidity in my point. Plus, they didn't have... Michael Bihn's Lane character there, and so I was upset about that because I thought, we were going to get a cameo from Michael Biehn, and so you have these, and apparently Morgan Elsbeth has control of this like system of planets, and yet again, all they went down with was a handful of, looks like a bunch of newbie guards, right? Like you would think that the New Republic, again, this is how stupid the New Republic is because they couldn't even last 20 years before the First Order takes over. Or even how long it is, but it's just stupid where it's like, okay, we're just going to go and send this girl ambassador who, should you would think she would be better prepared. And I just didn't like that portion of the storyline. I thought it was very stupid plotline armor put together where it's like, oh, she left and she's going to return, but she should know how bad it is. She should know how dangerous Morgan Elsbeth is. She shouldn't even gone in to like negotiate. She should just came in and arrested her. And she should have came in with more force because, again, she should know how many freaking armor guards are there, and what they're going to do. And like I said, that whole point was stupid. Like, I appreciate it then to the point, but I thought then she shouldn't have been raiding Bo-Katan because that made no sense in my opinion. Because again, why would Bo-Katan be the distress signal unless if it's just a general distress signal? But then again, why would Bo-Katan care other than it's supposed to know like you need to go find the Jedi? But it's like, how would Bo-Katan know Morgan Elsbeth is there and then know where Ahsoka is? Like, it would have made more sense that they would have had something to do with, our ambassador didn't return after 2 months or after a week or something, didn't check in.
Oh, she'll be lucky if the New Republic even notices.
Well, yeah, I know, because what's his name is what I'm saying. So, but that's what I meant. Like, so to me, it didn't do a good job of connecting why Ahsoka was even there. And then what brought Mando in. I don't think it did a good job.
Dan, your point there, because I don't think Bo-Katan knows anything about Morgan Elsbeth necessarily.
Yeah,
I
think it was definitely a general distress call.
Yeah, she got a distress call, probably couldn't answer it herself because she was going off to do what we see her do in The Mandalorian, and contacted her friend Ahsoka and said, hey, there's a distress call here. And then when Mando showed up, said, oh, well, I sent Ahsoka over to this planet. Not, I sent Ahsoka to fight Morgan Elsbeth.
But again, why would she send Ahsoka over? That doesn't say
because she got a distress call. Why would she not?
But Bo-Katan wouldn't do that.
Why not?
Sense. Because that's not what Bo-Katan does. Like,
no, you can't just say this isn't
like
what
this
she would do.
miserable hermit at this point. That's the whole point. She's only focused on getting Mandalore back at this point. And
which is why she didn't go herself. She's like, you know what? This isn't a Mandalorian thing. Let me go send someone else.
Like I said,
you can't just say she wouldn't do that. You have to have a reason.
But what's her reason for doing it then? Because to me, that isn't her character to do it.
Because it's not in her character to go herself. So
no, but why would she even care? Is what I'm saying. Like, why would she even like somebody sends a distress call? Why would she care
that she got a distress call?
Yeah, why would she care? Like, if she gets a distress call, nobody answers it. How does she know it's
not a terrible person?
But how does she know it's not even somebody just hit the button? I guess to me, it doesn't make sense for me. Again,
maybe at that point she's not acting on her honor as much as she once did. I agree with you that at that point in her life, she's a little beat down about.
She's disgruntled, hateful. Pointless. I mean, that's like the whole point. Mando goes back and she's sitting there sulking on her throne chair. Like
I would say she's sulking. I don't think she's hateful yet, or I don't think she ever quite gets to hateful. She's bitter, But anyway, Nathan, what did you dislike about these episodes?
All right. Well, the thing I most disliked about this episode has nothing to do with Bo-Katan. It has to do with the TIE Defenders, and it is that I always thought that these were Grand Admiral Thrawn's idea, and he was the big proponent for them, and it was all part of his clever plan. And it turns out, nope, he just stole his homework from somebody else. And to me,
but you didn't give her credit.
Well, in this show, he says, I'll give you credit. But in Rebels, he never mentions, oh, by the way, yes, these plans that I got from someone else. So it just made Thrawn seem a little less intelligent because there's this thing that I had always credited to him and his intelligence that turned out to not be him at all. Now, I will say it was smart of him to recognize this is a good idea and to use it. And, that's always been a hallmark of Thrawn over Darth Vader. Darth Vader, if you have a good idea, keep it to yourself because he will kill you and steal it. Thrawn will use it and give you credit. So, Thrawn's better in that regard, or not as evil, at least.
Not as evil. He's evil light.
Right. Yeah, but it did feel like they were taking something that was intended to be Thrawn's genius idea when it was originally introduced in Rebels, and saying, actually, this person over here did that, and he just took the idea.
But isn't that what the Empire always did? Like the Emperor, Grand Moff, Krennic, they never created the Death Star.
Yeah, but they're not Thrawn. That was the whole point. Is Thrawn is,
but he's not
really
an engineer.
smart.
I don't think he's ever been an engineer though. Like to come up with that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying he couldn't, but I never gotten the impression that he was like a mad engineer to create something that was so diabolical like that. To me, I mean,
I didn't necessarily think that he had done all the engineering work on it, but I thought he at least had the basic idea of, at least shielded TIE fighters so that our pilots don't die.
Like our enemies, right? Like the X-Wings and the Y-Wings and everything else.
Right, the rebels don't let all their pilots die.
I loved Ishtar. What was the name of the Moff that was telling Morgan Elsbeth, this is a great idea, but it's going to be way too expensive? What was that guy's name? Anyway, I think it was Istan.
I have to double check
whatever
that.
His name was. I loved him saying, this is horrendously expensive, and there's no way we're ever going to spend that much money on it. And I'm sitting there thinking, but like every fighter that the Rebellion has shields. And theoretically, they have way less money than y'all. How is this going to not work? Because even the newer ones they get later on in the Galactic Civil War, like the B-Wings and the A-Wings, have deflector shields. Like, every single one of their fighters has deflector shields. How come you guys can't afford that? And I think that was just an example of, A, the Empire's hubris, and B, they could afford it, but as Grand Admiral Thrawn Admiral Thrawn tells her in one of these episodes, they're in it for their own money, their own gain, and they're going to cut costs at the expense of lives, and that's always going to lead to our military getting weaker and weaker. And he's absolutely correct because, again, he's Admiral Thrawn. I'll restore some of his luster for you, Nathan. He was absolutely correct on the economics of war, and therefore understanding why the Empire was doomed if they didn't change their ways about the way they spend money on the military.
It is Moff Isdane, by the way.
Isdane. I knew it started with an I-S something or other. Moff Ishtar. Call me Ishmael.
Yep. Voiced by Tom Kunkel, who also voiced Villager Number 1. Key role there.
He is the number one villager. All right, question 3. What connections did you draw to the rest of the Star Wars galaxy, Derrick?
I mean, we've listed everything. I think at this point.
Yeah, we got a bajillion of them.
I mean, we got to actually see, the Nightsisters with Grievous, and we got to see more continuation of that. We got to see obviously all of Morgan Elsbeth. We talked about the whole Thrawn and how he's gonna, do the TIE Defender and the connectivity there. We talked about seeing Rook. Again, we saw the village of Corvus, right, or on the planet Corvus, and to Nathan's point earlier, right, we saw the Force burned down, like literally, at that point of whenever we're supposed to assume Mando's coming in, or Ahsoka's coming in, and then we get the town and Morgan Elsbeth's her staff, her Beskar staff. We get to see that numerous times. We even get to see her whole little which I was always curious because the Nightsisters never had this, so I was curious where she came up with kind of the whole Oriental building, right? The design of it. I mean, the town it seems very Asian influenced, even feudal Japan and the way it's designed. But it was just we got to see her with the bridge and the water garden and all that stuff. So, anyways, that. Like I said, pretty much everything we talked about.
Yeah, for me, the big connections, aside from the battle droids and General Grievous, Darth Vader coming. Oh, sorry, that hasn't happened yet. But the parts where we have the dark side fighting the light side Nightsisters, or I guess I should say Force Witches, because they're not all Nightsisters, and the whole energy bow thing. Which has become like a hallmark of Force Witches for some reason. I guess it's maybe a nod to Amazons and how they were supposed to be such great archers, and all these female warriors. But that was a big connection for me. And Captain Pelion. It was cool to see Captain Pelion doing stuff, and he's still a captain. Dude man's going to be the Harry Kim of the Empire. He's never going to get promoted. Apparently he was captain forever. But maybe he's the James T. Kirk, where he's all, you know what? I kind of like being captain. Just keep me right here so I can keep being
He
in
wants the
charge of my
ship.
Star Destroyer and taking my ship and doing stuff, you know. Don't let them promote you. Anyway, so maybe that's his deal, but I loved seeing him again. He must have gone gray when he was like in his 30s because he had the gray hair here even, and you know he's just continuing to have it.
The Steve Martin
trying to-
of the
He's the
Star
Steve
Wars.
Martin of the
Steve
Empire.
Martin.
Yeah, that's right. And then, of course, I already mentioned Ruck. That was a really good connection. Yeah, I think that's about the only ones for me. Nathan, what do you got connection-wise? Anything we haven't hit on?
There is one thing that we haven't hit on that I just learned when I was looking up Moff Izdane's name, and that is Rook was voiced by none other than Warwick Davis.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's a connection to the Star Wars galaxy and the real world of Star Wars. Yeah,
Yep.
good times.
Other than that,
Okay.
yeah, we've got all the things we talked about: General Grievous, Captain Pelion, the TIE Defender program, ties to the scene in Mandalorian with Ahsoka there. Yeah, all of that.
Cool.
The whole thing.
Yes, all of it is connected because this is one of those projects where Star Wars Animation is trying to do a lot of, connective tissue. All right, question 4. Derrick, you had a custom question here.
Yes. So, when do you think Morgan connects with the Night Sister elders in the other galaxy? Do we think this is before or after Thrawn? Like specifically, like when Thrawn is, even before she even meets, works with Thrawn when she's still on Corvus, prior to her going to the Empire, or do you think it's after, basically Thrawn is shifted off into the other galaxy?
I think that this happens before she meets Thrawn. And in fact, I think that the whole connecting with other Night Sisters is part of the reason that Morgan Elsbeth ends up on Corvus. Like, the whole reason she initially goes to that planet is because of either there's a gate there, or there's some tablets of prophecy there about the gates, or there's some kind of clue there pointing to the other galaxy, something about Peridia, whatever. Because I don't think she went to Corvus just to be all, hey, there's a colony here that I can subjugate. In fact, Wing says that he regrets putting the Night Sister in charge. So I think that she showed up to find out whatever it was that she was looking for about Peridia, or maybe even find a connection to the other Night Sisters in the other galaxy. And then she decides, I'm going to take this place over and use it as my base of operations, then appeal to the Empire in order to get the resources I need to get to Peridia. So yeah, I think this was before Grand Admiral Thrawn, and Thrawn ending up there via the Purrgil in Rebels was happenstance from Morgan's perspective, but the will of the Force from the light side perspective, because that had to happen. And in my opinion, Thrawn had to be removed from the playing field in order for the Rebels to win. Nathan, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to say that I think she connected with the other Night Sisters after meeting Thrawn, but before Thrawn went off with the Purrgil. And my reasoning for that is because that's what I initially assumed and never questioned it. I didn't really have a reason for that. It's just kind of the impression that I got. So I'm going to admonish myself, as I did Derrick just a few minutes ago. I can't just say that and not have a reason. So I'm probably wrong.
Okay, Derrick, it was your question. What are your thoughts, before or after Thrawn?
I
BT
actually
or AT?
well, I think it's actually when Thrawn gets sent to, as you said, Peridia is the planet. I can't remember. So when he gets sent there, he just happens to run into the Night Sisters, and that's when he's like, here's oh, Night Sisters, I find this out, right? He lands on this planet or goes for it, or maybe he doesn't, right? Maybe he just at some point searches for some type of intelligent life and comes across, oh, there's these witches, they might be able to help you. And then when he goes there, it's like, oh, conveniently, your Night Sisters, I know one of your daughters back in my galaxy. And he's like, he likes to collect relics and, artistry and all that. So he has something of Morgan's, and that's how they're able to connect with her. That's how I always interpreted it. But I was just curious, like I said, from what other people were thinking, since we kind of get, again, more of her backstory in this. So.
I think the argument for what Scott said is really the fact that Morgan is still on Corvus years later. Uh, if she found out about the other Night Sisters after Thrawn went over to the other galaxy, you would think that she would have done something when that happened, or whenever he somehow got word back to her that, hey, there's other Night Sisters here, that she would go ahead and enact some plan. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that she went to Corvus because of these other Night Sisters, and it just has taken however long to be able to do something about it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we get any kind of confirmation about one way or the other how she knew about Peridia in Ahsoka season 2, or maybe even there's going to be another follow-up story about Morgan Elsbeth, because it seems like Lucasfilm is eager to have her do more stuff and be more important. They just made her the creator of the TIE Defender, which is a huge departure from, like Nathan was saying, about what most people assumed with regard to the TIE Defender project for all these years. It's almost like finding out that, Jyn Erso's dad created the Death Star and not Grand Moff Tarkin creating the Death Star. So that's pretty cool. All right, question number 5. This one was my question. Does the presence of the Mountain Tribe mean that there are other light side covens of Force witches out there? And please note that word coven, which we'll talk about some more when it comes to the second half of Tales of the Empire. So, what do you think, guys? Nathan, more light side Force witches?
I don't think it necessarily means that there are more light side Force witches, but I think it means that there is a possibility of it. Basically, it comes down to, do they end up with another story that they want to tell with light side Force witches? I don't know that there is another story there. So if there are other covens, we may just never hear about them.
Okay. Derek, what do you think? More light side Force witches?
Yeah, I would assume it would be just like anything else, right? At some point, a tribe of different beliefs happens and breaks away, right? And like you said, that the Night Sisters, and their coven happened to be in the woods. And where's the next place for them to go? It's the mountains, essentially. They obviously lived close enough, so they had to be some relation to that, because I think when you have those two types of different religions, typically there's some type of war going on, right? The internal civil war. And in this instance, we never got that feeling. Not to say that there wasn't, but again, we feel like there could have been, right? And then they were banished to the mountains. That could have been something, right? But essentially, it felt like this tribe of mountain witches wasn't as practicing either, because I feel like had the mother main witch shown the girls, like, you don't need weapons, right? We have our own power. I don't feel like those girls were well aware of what they could do, because that was the whole point of what brought it back. Like, oh, we didn't need to go and rely on this, Morgan Elsbeth, and be fearful and all this, because we had the power in us all in our own. And then again, she comes back and realizes the bad way, or the things that she's fallen for, comes back to the light and dies, like we talked about. So I feel like at this point, it's kind of a kind of one with nature type deal, but really, only using it when need be. But it feels like it's because they haven't had to in forever that they didn't. So, or again, she could have been the only one. She could have been like the last, the great elder mother of the tribe. She was the Night Sister and had the power. But then as her tribe was growing, again, like we talked about with the Force, right? If you don't use it, you lose it, essentially, right? So if these kids were Force sensitive to begin with, but then never trained it, they kind of lost their way. She was just strong all this time when she finally had to be on her own, so she could still know how to use it and summon it, but all the other rest of the tribe doesn't. So she could just be, she's the one-off compared to everybody else of the tribe.
True. For my answer to my own question here, I think this confirms that there are indeed other light side covens out there somewhere, and I think that we will actually see another light side group of Force witches in Star Wars The Acolyte later this summer. I think that our main character who fights Carrie-Anne Moss in the trailer is a dark side, almost Night Sister type Force witch, but that when Carrie-Anne Moss goes and investigates, she will find that there are plenty more other unregistered Force users out there, because there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy, Horatio. And so therefore, she's going to learn and try to teach the other Jedi, but they won't accept it. She'll try to teach the other Jedi about all the Force witches out there and how they shouldn't assume that they are evil just because they're a Force witch and they interpret the Force differently than the Jedi Order does, or even differently than the Sith do. But that will be the kind of situation where the Jedi's orthodoxy and hubris get in their way, and maybe we'll even see Master Indara herself get excommunicated, or whatever we call it when you're a Jedi that gets kicked out of the temple because you're too much like Qui-Gon Jinn, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think this was a major moment of showing us that there are lots of different Force witches out there, and the term coven is important when it comes to a group of Force users who don't want to have the kind of organizational architecture that the Jedi Order or the Sith have, when they want to arrange themselves in a different way socially, which we can talk about some more after the break. But for right now, we will take a break.
I was going to comment on that.
Yeah, sorry.
We have conversation, Scott. You had good comments. So,
okay, good.
A couple of good points, though. So maybe the Light Coven witches are who resurrect Asajj.
Ooh, I love it, because I still want to know how Asajj is alive.
I
I'm
do
so
too.
disappointed that Bad Batch didn't show us what the heck happened.
And she's obviously buried on Dathomir, right? So
yes.
So who else is going to res her? So, but the only thing I was very unhappy about the Light Witches, though. They had to use regular bows. They didn't have light bows. Like, you thought they could have like either light bows that were like blue or green or something, or instead of purple and red. But here we are, they're just using plain bows. So that's why I figured, like, oh, they've lost their power then, essentially is how I interpret it, right? Because they're having to use action.
Or those particular girls, like you said, hadn't actually achieved their power yet. Maybe there's some kind of a like ritual you have to go through to have the Force bestowed upon you, right? I mean, the light side version of the Jedi, you have to pass the Jedi trials, right? And so on and so forth. So, yeah, cool.
But I think that's who reses Asajj.
Scott, you do bring up an interesting point about how, we can have light side Force users who are not part of the Jedi. It's almost as though to say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is hubris.
Indeed it is. Indeed it is. All right, so speaking of hubris, we guys want you to know that we're the best podcast network on the whole internet. So here are some other shows that you can listen to on the FPN.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here are the other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. Culture Clash, where we discuss the latest in entertainment and pop culture. Blooded Kings, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theater, we celebrate our favorite movies. And Time Warp, our fandom flashback show discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie, TV, and pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Hair Metal Podcast, we cover the rock metal music of the 80s and early 90s. Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, discussing the time-traveling Doctor Who universe. Lethal Mullet, an action film podcast covering the 80s, 90s, and beyond. Also, check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, our Star Wars podcast. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast with a deep dive into the final frontier. The Fandom Show, our Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube show discussing the hottest topics in fandom. The True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic and Television Universe. Union Federation, our Star Trek and the Orville show. And we're proud to welcome the BQN Network to the Fandom Podcast Network. Please visit our friends on the BQN Network, a Star Trek Universe podcast that also includes your favorite topics, movies, history, superheroes, and more. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on YouTube. The Fandom Podcast Network is also on all major podcast platforms. The Fandom Podcast Network audio master feed is on Podbean at fpnet.podbean.com. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
All right, thanks very much, Kevin. Okay, charging right along, you guys, into episodes 4 through 6 of Tales of the Empire. This one, a little miniature story about Bariss Offee. Nathan, what is the deal with Bariss Offee getting all this attention here recently? And by that I mean like the past 5 years almost, because she ended up being part of a storyline in Rebels, and at least her ghost or whatever it was, and so on and so forth. Was she a much bigger part of the Clone Wars than I'm remembering? I mean, I know she had that whole thing where she killed somebody, like the bombing thing that she basically framed Ahsoka. But what is the deal here?
All right, so she was not actually in Rebels. That was her master, who's not her ghost, but her bones were used as kind of a light side force beacon to draw potential Jedi in, because they would sense her presence there, and then they would, murder the Jedi to death. Luminara, yes, Luminara and Duli. And this was her Padawan, Bariss Offee was.
Gotcha. Okay,
and
my bad.
she was about the same age as Ahsoka, so she and Ahsoka had some adventures together. They had some adventures together on Geonosis, of all places, in a second battle at Geonosis. So they had become kind of close friends at one point, and then Bariss Offee realized, hey, the Jedi are not all they're cracked up to be. There's some issues. They are giving into the decadence of war, as the ghost of Yoda said in a very weird arc. But basically, she became disillusioned with the Jedi themselves and felt that they were taking this whole war thing too, I don't want to say too seriously, but they were becoming warriors instead of peacekeepers.
They were way too into it.
Yes. So she blew up part of the Jedi Temple. And then we had this whole
This is
arc.
how I proved non-violence is the way, by blowing stuff up.
Right. Clearly, nothing wrong with this philosophy at all. We have this arc where Ahsoka is framed for this temple bombing, which I think is absolutely horrible because, again, they were close friends. So she basically framed her best friend for this horrible crime. I don't think she really intended to. She was actually trying to frame somebody else who was just a random day worker who came in and cleaned up after the Jedi. But then, when things kind of went sideways, Ahsoka became a convenient, oh yeah, it could be her. So obviously that didn't go well for her. Anakin investigated, recognized, hey, Bariss Offee has done this horrible thing. And Bariss Offee actually steals Ventress's lightsabers and has a duel with Anakin using Asajj Ventress's lightsabers, and talks about how red looks better on her anyway. At which point I'm like, dang, she has fully gone to the dark side and she will never be redeemed.
About that.
Yeah.
So episodes 4 through 6 of Tales of the Empire. What did you like best about these episodes, Derrick?
I did like the whole story of the Inquisitors. We got to see how basically fallen Jedi were to the point of being forced into a gladiator type deal style. And then from there, they were picked out and they became Inquisitors. And so I really wish, we got to see a bit more of that. But that was really just all that, episode 4 was about for the most part. Since episode 5 was just kind of her going on side missions then with her new master, which was, I can't remember the one or the other fallen Jedi from that. So, it was a really cool. I like to see that. We get to, see her kill, and how ruthless they basically were, because the one guy's like, I'm out of here. And he's like, well, nope, you're dead. And then the other one was basically forced Bariss Offee to kill him because he was already trying to kill her, since he kind of knew how the game works. And then in the end, she was, the one who had to kill him. But it was kind of a cool episode. I really like that before then my disappointment episode 5 and 6. So
Okay, all right. My favorite part about this episode, these episodes, I should say. Again, I made some notes. So for Devoted, the first episode that involved Bariss Offee, I enjoyed seeing the formation of the Inquisitors. Vader showed up. That was cool. I'm still such a Vader fanboy. Like anytime Vader shows up, like, oh, this is serious Star Wars now. Then the duel between Bariss Offee and the other guy, I can't remember their names.
he looked like a clown.
Yeah, he had that weird hair that just came out the sides of his head. Anyway, when they were in the little red field of doom and they had to fight in front of the big pit, the Grand Inquisitor just goes ahead and explains to them, now you can choose not to fight, in which case we'll just kill you both. And it very much reminded me of Rick and Morty, where the aliens show up to be all, show me what you got. And the one planet is all like, this entire contest is pointless and there's no need for civilized people to bajoom. And they just like evaporate the whole planet because they won't participate in the fight. So that's exactly the same vibe I got here. And then they toss in the lightsaber, a red lightsaber at that, basically saying, you're either going to have to turn into one of the super evil murderers or we're just going to kill you. So this is our ultimate trial by fire, the opening of Pit of Doom and the big red energy field really gave the whole thing a Mustafarian feel anyway, so it kind of felt like the big duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar, where they were, basically one of them turns to the dark side and the other one doesn't. In episode 5, Realization, I liked the idea that there was all this discussion about how these people on the planet where Lynn and Bariss Offee go are living in squalor and, poor conditions. And Bariss Offee is like, how does the Emperor allow this? Because she knows that the Empire is awash in resources and could easily meet everyone's basic needs if they just spent a little less money on the military. Wait, or is that us? Anyway, the point is... Porque no las dos. And so the point was that then Lynn explains that loyalty gets rewarded and the people could get their needs met by the Empire, but first they have to prove that they're worth it, and that these people have not yet proven that, so that she and Bariss Offee are there to see if they can, because they know there's a Jedi hanging around, and they want to see if they can get these people to turn the Jedi over to them as Inquisitors. And so I enjoyed the fact that there was this whole discussion about this is how the Empire works. Loyalty is rewarded. At least that's what the propaganda says. And then finally, in The Way Out, I enjoyed seeing how Bariss Offee is out there on her own to show us that it's been a lot of time and she's sort of checked out of society as a whole. She has really short, unkempt hair, and she's not caring that much about her presentation of the way, or her looks, right? So this is always the way that we know that some female has decided to check out. She drops the makeup and doesn't do her hair. So she's out there as a wise woman and still a healer. I like this idea that Bariss Offee's connection to the Force now focuses on healing and regenerating, because that's what she is doing in her own spirit now that she has gone all, like Nathan said, red always looked better on me anyway. She went all the way down to the dark side, down to the point of being an Inquisitor, and literally kneeling in front of Vader himself. And now she's all, no, this was wrong. I'm going to have to redeem myself. And she gets to do it for a few years. And she even helps other people do it before she meets her death. Because redemption does equal death, but Bariss Offee kind of subverts the trope here because she lives long enough to help a bunch of other people find their way to redemption. I'd love to know who that masked humanoid woman was that was out in the snow with her and the little furry guy. I can't remember the name of his species. But anyway, we never see that other lady's face. I kept thinking that she was going to pull back her hood and be somewhat important, somebody that we knew. But we didn't get to see that, so we're just left to fill in the blanks there as to maybe, much like Broom Boy in The Last Jedi. She's not anybody super important, but someday she might be. And she's been inspired by Bariss Offee, much the same way that Broom Boy was inspired by Luke Skywalker. And the whole galaxy was inspired by Luke Skywalker. So those are my favorite things about these 3 episodes. Nathan, what you got?
Well, I'm kind of with Derek on this one. My favorite thing about this whole arc of episodes was seeing the Inquisitors, seeing how that was set up, seeing the just sheer absolute ruthlessness of the Grand Inquisitor of, yeah, you don't have to fight, but we'll kill you both if you don't. And by the way, this duel is to the death. One of you's not coming out, maybe neither of you. And seeing Darth Vader come back, that was really cool. And then I was a little disappointed that he just showed up and then disappeared. I was really hoping to see more of him. And then once we get into the second and third episodes, I just didn't like those as much. Part of it is because I really expected Bariss Offee to not be redeemed. And that's kind of the story that I wanted. And it's not the story that I got. It's not to say that this is a bad story, but it's not what I would have preferred.
This is you walking out of the theater after watching The Rise of Skywalker. I don't want to say that it's really, really bad, but it's definitely not what I wanted.
Right.
All right, question number 2. And Nathan, this time we'll start with you. What did you like least about these episodes? I think you kind of nailed it a little bit there.
I did. I liked least that Bariss Offee was redeemed. That I wanted to see a story where we had somebody go to the dark side and just stay in the dark side and revel in the dark side. Most of the stories that we see of characters who are on the dark side, we have never seen them on the light side. Vader is obviously a big exception there, but then he gets redeemed in the end. So most of the characters that we see on the light side who then go to the dark side, we then see redeemed, and that just happened again. It's getting a little bit repetitious. I would have loved to have seen more about the Inquisitors. I would have loved to have seen Vader doing some training with Bariss Offee. Would have been great.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I could have written the story, I would have written it such that at some point Bariss Offee figures out that, hey, this Darth Vader guy is Anakin Skywalker. And Darth Vader is like, yeah, I can't have that secret come out. You did.
I'm going to have to kill you.
And that's why you aren't in anything from this point on, because you did. That's what I would have done. Like I said, just because that's what I would have done doesn't mean that the story isn't a good story. It's just not one that I care as much about, which is disappointing because I do care about the character a lot.
Yeah, all right. Derek, what did you dislike about these 3 episodes?
I mean, Nathan hit it on the mark. At this point, it's making Anakin Skywalker and to some point even Ben Solo's redemption's stupid. Doesn't mean anything. Everybody can do it, right? And I guess it's like if you are hardcore pressed Christianity and Catholicism and all that stuff, like I guess maybe it makes you feel better because, you can be a terrible person and kill all these people and yet somehow, I forgive myself and I'll be redeemed into heaven. Like, okay, whatever. For the most of us that say that's a little weird of a religion. But not to pick on those, but that's what it feels like at this point, right? It just feels like, okay, everybody can, I liked the first portion, episode 4. And then I thought really by episode 5, she was going to be conflicted still. And we were going to get really her commitment to it. But we didn't get that. She's always this tender-hearted person. It's like, well, what happened to her? Like, she wasn't in prison for that very long. It's not like, you thought she would have been pissed off at Sky Guy and Snips for eternity. And here they are to that. It's like, well, the Jedi Order falls. She's given a second chance. And then yet, I guess, okay, I don't know. It's getting repetitive and it just doesn't mean anything for the original things when everybody keeps doing it, right? Like not everybody's story has to be this dang same thing that everyone else has that we've gotten, and it's just come up with something unique. Like it's okay for people to be bad guys. I mean, let's be honest. That's why we like Maul so much, right? Like even as Maul died, he was only concerned that the chosen one was going to seek revenge for them. Like that's how bad Maul was, and that's what we love, right? And that's what we want to see. It's like once you fall to the dark side, you're supposed to stay bad, and that's why then Anakin Skywalker's redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi means so much, right? and that's supposed to be what we're supposed to again, I'm not going to, because it's just repeating myself at this point. So again, there was some good parts of I really liked the lightsaber duel of them in the mist and the fog on the mountain. That was really cool in episode 5. But then again, it was just like, okay, and then I did like on episode 6 where whatever her the Inquisitor, what was it,
the fourth sister?
Yeah, the fourth sister. She's like, when I finally gave up looking for you, then I finally find you. I thought that was kind of ironic in the way the world works, right? And I thought that was a little bit of a nice typical trope, but it was funny. But yeah, it's like I said, just otherwise it's like, okay, I guess to me, I would have rather her gone full-fledged. Either I like Nathan's suggestion of she finds out Vader's Sky Guy, and that's how he has her killed. Because then we also get I thought it'd been cool, like she was one of the original Inquisitors that was hunting Ahsoka, and Ahsoka had to kill her, and then that's how the seventh sister and the fifth brother come in, because that's why they're so pissed, and we get Ahsoka and Rebels fighting, because she's obviously engaged them before. So to me, that would have been better off that Bariss Offee, to the point where she's Ahsoka had to kill her because Bariss Offee had fallen that much, and she was still pissed off, whatever, 15 years later, almost to that point, whenever season 2 of Rebels happens, from the point of when she was arrested and, and trialed in court. She would have kept that anger for that, 15 plus years. Anyways.
Yeah. I think it would have been different if Clone Wars had presented her as a political idealist who realized that the Jedi were going the wrong way and was opposing them on moral grounds. But by the end of that arc, she had really fallen to the dark side. And it was obvious that, okay, no, she did this because she's angry and she's going down that dark path. It would have been something else if it was just political idealism, but it wasn't. And this really felt like a reversal of course for her.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I absolutely respect your opinion, Derek, about how you don't need to see everybody get redeemed. Some people need to be a villain, and Maul and Palpatine, they're so iconic almost because they don't get redeemed, and they're evil through and through. Palpatine's trying to become more evil. That's like his whole shtick, right? But here in the real world, I'm very glad that anybody can get saved. I've been a Christian since 1988, and I'm really happy that, yes, anybody can get saved. Now, in Star Wars, I agree, sometimes the stories are better when people cannot necessarily get that redemption, or at the very least, they have to get punished for what they did firsthand before they can, right? And I think both Anakin and, in this case, Bariss Offee do have a lot of that punishment. The thing I disliked the most about these 3 episodes was not the redemption arc, but rather not enough of the effects of the redemption arc. She saved that other Jedi from the fourth sister. What happened to that person? I want to know that person's story now. I would love to have seen, well, now that Bariss Offee has rescued them, what did they go on to do? And then clearly she's been healing and helping other people. By the time we get to episode 6 of Tales of the Empire here, she's been helping other people as this wise woman out in the wilderness. I'd love to see who else has she helped. What happened to the little kid that she helped save from the Inquisitors? And so on and so forth. There's just a lot of meat left on the bone with the way that they did these stories about Bariss Offee. And maybe that was part of the goal of Lucasfilm Animation, because they're waiting to see how fans react to that. Will they be clamoring for more Bariss Offee stories and or more Morgan Elsbeth stories? And I think that we very much have all mentioned other ways that we hope that they can go with it and show us more of these characters. But as it was, I felt that was a little too much of a tease, such that it wasn't an appetizer, it was an amuse-bouche that just left me wanting more and subtracted from my enjoyment from the rest of the meal that was these 3 episodes with Bariss Offee. All right, question number 3, connections to the rest of the galaxy. Well, I'll go first so I can do the big one. Darth Vader showed up, you guys. How cool was that? But also, we got to see the ice cave where the fourth sister, Lynn, goes. Stop calling me that. She goes in there, And she sees her own reflection several times. And every time it's like she can't stand what she sees and she attacks that particular ice wall. Or she's confused by what she sees because she thinks, because the way the sound is bouncing around in there, that she's just about to turn the corner and catch the refugees and the kid that she went in there to find. And then she's just once again confronted with herself, another roadblock. It absolutely reminded me of the mirror cave with Rey in The Last Jedi, where she kept standing in front of something that she was expecting to be this answer, and it was just herself. And in the case of Rey, it's herself over and over and over and over and over. And that sort of happens to Lynn because she keeps seeing her reflection in this wall, and then she finds another wall that's her reflection. So it's not exactly the same as the mirror cave at The Last Jedi. It's not exactly the same as Ahch-To, but the metaphor is definitely still there. And of course, all these are rooted in the original, this cave is strong with the Force, or in this case, the dark side, from Dagobah in The Empire Strikes Back. The moment
You
where
only
Star
take
Wars
what you
fans-
take with you.
That's right. The only thing in there is what you take with you. And you
And the
won't need
man
your
under the
weapons.
mask is you.
That's right. The man under the mask is you. You are your own dark side. You're just reflecting back what you put into the universe. So if you take those weapons with you, you're going to suffer the ramifications of those weapons. And so on and so forth, right? The metaphor was excellent. And to me, the biggest connection in Bariss Offee's story to any other Star Wars story, even more so than the idea of redeeming a dark side user, was this whole cave metaphor. And Bariss Offee herself exemplifies the fact that you never know for sure what you're going to find in that cave, because she went in there to help her sister. She went in there to help Lynn, not expecting that she herself would get killed by Lynn. And then she does. And so, it's an interesting ending to this story. Derrick, what do you got for connections?
I mean, obviously, the whole first episode 4 just had a ton, right? Besides Vader, you obviously got the Inquisitor, you got Lynn, because we obviously see them, really we see the fourth sister for the first time in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, right? And then I was disappointed, though, that we didn't get to see whoever the from the Ahsoka series, whoever the assassin one that we kept claiming. Who is that? Is that Bariss Offee? And we never got the connection that was, because to me that would have been really cool had that actually been like Bariss Offee died and they rezzed her and put her ghost into that, right? And
We
that would
should
have
we should look hard at the helmets. Maybe that was her, because there was a big deal about Bariss Offee puts on the helmet to become the Inquisitor.
But the problem is she's been redeemed, though. That was the problem. If she wasn't redeemed, then
Yeah.
I would have been okay with that. That's what I really would have loved, the connection had that been she stayed on the dark side, right? Because that would have been really cool. But anyways, so like I said, there was all that connectivity there. Like I said, I'm trying to think. I mean, typical episode 5. I mean, there was some really, like I said, with the lightsaber duel. Like I said, in the mist and the fog, kind of reminded me in Ahsoka, right, when Anakin and Ahsoka are in the world between worlds, and Anakin is coming through with the mist and the fog with his lightsaber, and you get the flash. And he becomes Vader for a second, and then flashes back, and he comes through. So, like I said, really like the dual side of things there. Like I said, there's probably some other metaphor things you could link into it, right? We did see, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, Scott, right, Bariss Offee and healing. We never had Force healing, and always just in video games, but now we've actually had it in numerous episodes and movies, that it's a thing. But yet, for whatever reason, just was never a thing in the Clone Wars. We never had a Jedi medic team that was just really good at force healing, and when there was death wounds, we could have saved somebody, but apparently it's a rare trait. Yeah.
All right, Nathan, what do you got connection-wise?
Well, I think we've covered most of the big ones with the appearances of the Grand Inquisitor, the Fourth Sister, Darth Vader, all of that. The one that I don't know that we've covered so far is the location where we have this duel and everything and all the training is the same place as in Kenobi, but in episode 4, it's not completely constructed yet. So when we arrive, We just see the bottom portion of that base just a little bit out of the water compared to the full construction that we see in Kenobi. So that was neat to see that location make a reappearance, and that is kind of the Inquisitor stronghold there.
When they had the girders and all sticking up out of it, but it was still dark as night, and like every so often the red energy would appear because dark side, it absolutely felt like Mordor. Like, this is Mordor with the big spiky things and the wrought iron gates and all that stuff. Yeah, there's Twin Towers, exactly. There was literally 2 towers coming up on either side there, right? This absolutely feels like Mordor to me. And I was like, I love the Lord of the Rings reference because you know how much Dave loves the Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
And this isn't the first Lord of the Rings connection in Star Wars animation.
No.
All right. Question number 4. Derrick, what do you got?
So my question was, and we've kind of complained about it, or at least I have. So do you think all the Inquisitors are like Bariss, the Grand Inquisitor, Reva, even Lynn to some degree? Because, right, like to your point earlier, right, she's all pissed off when she's seeing her reflection and how it is and how she's supposed to be frustrated herself. So we just think that are all the Inquisitors at some point just want to be redeemed and they just feel like they're stuck in a rut and they have to keep doing this because otherwise they die. But if they really could, they would just go off and, be light side people if they could.
I do, and I think Bariss Offee thinks this as well, because she tells Lynn, when Lynn's like, there's no way out. And Bariss Offee's like, that's what the Empire wants you to think. There's always a way out. And there's always a way for you to get redeemed. There is no irredeemable sin except for, ignoring the chance of redemption. There is no unforgivable thing that you can do that will bar you from ever going back to the light side. And I think this is especially true. And actually, I should look at this list that you have here, Derrick. Bariss Offee, the Grand Inquisitor, Rhea. Are they... They're all... Like, if you were an Inquisitor that was a former Jedi, I think you're like this, because the light side was in you. I'm not going to sit here and say... Nathan knows what I'm about to say. I'm not going to sit here and say, once saved, always saved. But, because I don't believe that. But, when the light side is in you... It's really hard for you to get it all the way out of you. And I think that the light side's still in you to the point, even though you're serving Darth Vader, like literally killing other Jedi who are on the run, part of you still wants to go back to the light. Actually, I don't need to say this is what I think. Ben Solo teaches us this in the sequel trilogy. Kylo says, I feel it again, the pull to the light. He's been on the light side, and he can't get away from it. So, is every Inquisitor going to get redeemed? Well, no, because we just talked about a couple that died that we didn't see get redeemed, like the zombie-ish guy in Ahsoka. We saw a couple Inquisitors bite the bullet without any kind of redemption in Rebels, especially at the temple where on Malachor, right? And so, yeah, Ben Solo is teaching us that if the light side is in you, you can't ever fully deny it, and you do still want that redemption, even if you don't. Sometimes you might not actually get it. So, no, they're not all like Bariss Offee and the Grand Inquisitor and so on, but if they were a former Jedi like those people, I think they do seek that redemption because they can't resist that pull to the light. Nathan?
Yeah, I'm not sure that the Grand Inquisitor cared that much for the idea of redemption. He was still on the dark side. But at the same time, he very much was, there are fates worse than death. And facing Darth Vader having failed is one of them. So, yeah, the dark side likes to talk about fear as my ally. But fear is only the ally of the people at the top of the food chain for the dark side. As mentioned in episode 6 of this series, fear is the master for these Inquisitors. They fear Vader. They don't serve Vader and Palpatine out of respect or loyalty. They serve them out of fear. And in that respect, yeah, if they can get away from the thing that they're afraid of, they would take a different path. Would that path necessarily be the light side? Maybe not for all of them. Maybe not for the Grand Inquisitor. He might just go with a different dark side. He might try to be his own emperor if he had the chance, if he had that power. But I think most of them, as Scott mentioned, if they started out on the light side, remember what it was like and how that was actually better and are afraid of trying to go back. And quite honestly, rightfully so, because how many Jedi have died at the hands of Darth Vader? Especially if we count the younglings. Lots.
Yeah.
So, I understand why they're afraid. But at the same time, the pull of the light side does exist. So, yeah, I think most of them would, if they had ever been on the light side. Now, I think there are people like Darth Maul, who was never on the light side. He wasn't ever given that choice. He was raised to be a dark side wielder. So he doesn't really feel the pull of the light like some of these others do, because he never experienced that in the first place.
Yeah, excellent points. Derrick, what's your answer to your own question here?
I mean, yeah, I feel there's obviously a lot more out there. I just feel like that's been the majority of unless if they died while, serving, but it seems like almost every one of them would rather, be redeemed or go be a hermit somewhere else at this point. So it'd be interesting to see how like the fifth brother and the seventh sister became Inquisitors, right? Because you don't really get their stories that we have. We obviously know the fourth sister. We know Rhea. Obviously, we know, the Grand Inquisitor to some point. We obviously, Bariss Offee never gets numbered, so we don't know what she would have been if she actually even achieved full Inquisitor status. She could have just been like sub-assassin type deal Inquisitor before, because she's obviously, episode 5 doesn't take that, is not that far removed from episode 4. Like, it seems like she's still in, apprentice mode. So she may never even be called a quote unquote a full Inquisitor. She just kind of got the, gear to go with it. So.
Yeah. All right. So time for our fifth and final question for tonight's episode of the podcast. Take it away, Nathan.
All right. So Bariss Offee had some time apart from the Inquisitors, and we don't know what happened with her during that time. So my question is, do we think Bariss Offee ever reconnected with Ahsoka while she was out there? And if so, is that something that we would like to see in a future Star Wars production? And I'll go ahead and answer and say, I don't think she did. I got the impression from these episodes that she never reached out to Ahsoka, which I find disappointing, because I would have liked to see a reunion between the two. But then again, on the other hand, I would have liked to have seen that reunion more in the sense of Bariss Offee has gone to the dark side and must duel Ahsoka. And I'm not sure how much I care about them getting together and being like, oh, yes, I remember the good old Jedi days. I think if they had, then Bariss Offee would just still hang out with Ahsoka and not have gone off and been a hermit on her own. But I am interested in what you guys think.
All right, Derrick, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, Ahsoka, not saying she'd be bitter or not, because obviously we find out, she can be bitter because that's how Ahsoka is with Sabine. So she could have been like, well, you tried to kill me and blame me on everything. So yeah, I'm going to stay bitter at you. Right. So,
I mean, she is the reason that Ahsoka is not a Jedi.
So, I think to some degree, I think Ahsoka did see the kind of where it was going before that, right? I think with all the training, but yes, you were absolutely 100% right. That's what pushed her over the edge and definitely didn't get it. So I agree with you on that one. But yeah, I like your original thought. Like, I'd rather have seen them duel. Like, that would have been better, right? Like, we would have gotten, because really, to be fair, she didn't really get much of a duel, because she got the duel with her and Asajj fighting her, right? And then she beat them essentially and escaped. And then basically Anakin had to go and fight her and then force choke her before he was able to get her to, submit and, get her testimony that, or, her statement that she did do it. So
see, and that could have been the perfect setup for how she figures out that Vader is Anakin.
Yeah.
Oh, I recognize that force choke.
I still got it indented on my lyrics. So, because you would think that there's enough that they would have that they can Vader says, I sense my former master, a presence I haven't felt forever. So you would think when somebody's been quote unquote touched by their force presence, it would almost leave like a distinct stamp or smell or something, right? That they would know who that exactly is, to your point, right, Nathan? So I've been force choked. I can literally feel the same presence I did, not that long ago, to be fair, right? So
right. Yeah, and, it could be just kind of a vague sense at first of, I know who this is, but I can't place it. Like, who is this? And then later, oh,
it's like recognizing somebody's handwriting. At first, you're like, I've seen this writing before, and then you're like, oh, that's who it is, or it's the thumbprint on the force choke. Right?
Yeah. So.
Or as I like to say about Rey and the Force Awakens, it's the lightsaber technique that is like your thumbprint. You can tell she's a Palpatine because the way she swings that sword, or rather, stabby stab.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. So my answer to the question here: do we think Bariss Offee ever reconnected with Ahsoka? Yes. And in fact, I think it happens at some point when Bariss Offee has thrown away the helmet, pushed Lynn, the Force sister, off the side of the mountain, and she's rescuing that other Jedi, and somehow Bariss Offee reaches out to the Force, a la Grogu, just beaconing, just calling anybody out there. Hello, this is me, Grogu.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, this is me, Grogu, on shortwave 12. Is anybody out there? And Bariss Offee gets the signal, follows it. Oh my God, it's Ahsoka. And Ahsoka is like, what the heck are you doing here? And Bariss Offee is all, what the heck are you doing here? I was calling out for somebody on the light side. You're not even a Jedi anymore. And Ahsoka is all, you're one to talk. You're not a Jedi anymore. You're as far as could be. Can you tell that I do want to see this story? Because yes, I do. I'm even writing parts of it. Maybe I'll just do it as fan fiction because I don't think we're ever going to get it. Could be. I mean, I never would have expected another Morgan Elsbeth story. Yeah, comic book. I'll take it as a comic book. Sure thing.
Yeah.
Comic book, one of the major American art forms. And so, I think that they did meet. We'll see it at some point, maybe.
Will you will us it?
Maybe. Anyway, my point is, I think that, yes, that's part of the reason that Bariss Offee ends up in the wilderness. Nathan, you were saying if she met Ahsoka, they would still be doing their thing. But I think that she sees that Ahsoka is sort of on her path in the wilderness during the whole Galactic Civil War. And Bariss Offee is like, well, maybe I should do that too. I can't go fight the Empire on the sides with commando missions like Ahsoka does. I'm not Fulcrum, but I can go and help heal people and point people back toward the light and show them it is possible. Because look, it happened to me. And that's essentially what she's trying to do with Lynn in her final adventure. So, yeah, there we go. All right, well, I guess we really took apart Tales of the Empire, guys. Pretty good episode of the show. Anybody got any closing thoughts they want to talk about?
I need Tales of the Cantina.
Yes,
Tales of Jabba's Palace.
Yeah, it writes itself, right? I'm eager for a fringe version of these. So we've had basically a light side version and a dark side version. Let's get I'm the Mindu. I want one in the middle.
Yeah, no Force users.
Right, exactly. Okay, well, speaking of I want more stories, Nathan, why don't you tell people where... Wait, I'm skipping. Hold on. I don't want to skip Derrick's
I will absolutely tell people what shirt I am wearing.
What Star Wars shirt you're wearing this week. Yes.
In honor of Tales of the Empire, I am wearing my Empire Strikes Back inspired Hawaiian t-shirt that I got from her universe. I love this shirt. It feels great. You should definitely go buy one.
I like
you
the
specifically, Scott.
Yeah, me specifically. I love the crossed lightsabers on the up there by the lapel too. That's really cool.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Derrick, what do you got? What Star Wars shirt do you have on?
So, as I mentioned, I've bought a bunch of Star Wars shirts. So you get to see the second shirt, as I revealed last week's was the Boonta Eve pod race, and this one I hope you'll appreciate the little bit of a dad joke here, Scott.
Okay, so we have Kit Fisto and another Jedi doing the Fisto bump, and they are fist bumping each other.
Wow.
Not a fist bump, a Fisto bump. Good times. That's awesome. My shirt this week is in keeping with the whole Tales of the So-and-so. In this case, it's Tales of the Mandalorian because I've got Grogu on my shirt, and he says, I'm all ears because, well, he is like 65% ear. So he's good times.
If Dumbo
if you guys
was a Yoda race.
If Dumbo was a Star Wars character, that's him. Well, if you guys want your own cool What a Piece of Junk t-shirt or coffee mug or so forth, please visit our store at tpublic.com and search up the Fandom Podcast Network. You can find all kinds of cool stuff like Derrick's coffee mug right there, What a Piece of Junk on the FPN, and we even make like iPad covers and pillows and so on and so forth. All right, now, Nathan, can you tell people where they can find us out there on the internet, please?
I absolutely can. You can find us pretty much anywhere you can look. That's right. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play. We're even on YouTube. That's right, YouTube. So anywhere your pods are cast, you can find us. You can also find us on Facebook at What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, or you can email us at whatapieceofjunkpod@gmail.com. On Twitter, we're at What Wars, and on Instagram, we are at the Fandom Podcast Network, and that is, of course, for the entire Fandom Podcast Network, not just What a Piece of Junk. If you do listen to us on Apple or honestly anywhere that allows you to rate us, we would love for you to leave a rating. And Derrick, can you tell us why?
Well, listeners, we're tired of working the manufacturing plants of Corvus. We'd really appreciate if you would just leave us 5-star reviews so that way Morgan and Thrawn will feel that the TIE Defender project is complete and we won't have to be enslaved anymore in working those. So 5-star reviews will definitely help get them off our backs. It'll allow other folks to find us on the streaming platforms and the podcast platforms that you're listening on, or even on the YouTube page. Obviously, any types of likes, help in the algorithm. So please leave us 5-star reviews. Again, we'll take anything, especially if you do, leave us why you're not giving us a 5-star review. If you don't, give us a 5-star review. You don't have to leave a comment, but if you're not going to give us a 5-star review, we demand a comment. So anyways, that's the main reason why.
Yep, absolutely. So anything you guys want to tell us between shows, we are always on the lookout for interactions with you on social media. But we want to thank all of you for joining us for this in-depth discussion of Tales of the Empire. Don't forget, we're going to take a little bit of a break for making new episodes of the podcast as we prepare for Star Wars The Acolyte coming up this June. Looks pretty amazing. I can't wait to see what is going to happen. And until then, please always remember to respect each other and respect each other's fandom. All right, Nathan, punch it.